is Representative Dan Ankleys. I'm the brand new House co-chair of the committee. And before we get into the meat of our agenda this morning, I think we should just go around and do introductions. I think there are mics kind of picking up all of our sound throughout the room. So we'll start in person first, and then we'll do introductions from those of us joining on Zoom. That's okay. So why don't we start to my left?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Wilcox. I'm the research administrator for the PFAS Fund.
Good morning. I am Beth Valentine. I'm the director of the PFAS Fund.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Becca Bolus, and I work for Maine Public Health Association.
My name is Jenny Tilton-Flood. I'm a dairy farmer, and I sit in a position to represent agriculture.
Good morning. I'm Melanie Loisum, Commissioner at the Department of Environmental Protection.
Hi, I'm Sam Hayden. I'm a scientist with Nova Enviro Labs. We're a PFAS water testing lab in Portland, Maine.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Sheila Leonard from the Maine Agricultural Mediation Program and from the PFAS Navigator Program.
Hi, my name is Jamie Connolly. I'm with Kleinfelder. Here to listen and learn.
Hi, Scott Grieco. I'm also with Kleinfelder.
We'll start with online introductions. I'll go with the commissioner first.
Good morning, everyone. Amanda Beal here, Commissioner of the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. I had hoped to be with you in person, but you might be able to hear I'm just getting over a cold. So I'm just going to stay one building away, sequestered in my office, so I don't spread any of this, fun illness with anyone.
Hi, I'm Romy. I work at Northern Health, and we do PFAS testing and some PFAS research. I'll pass it to Andrew.
I'm Andrew Carpenter, also from Northern Tilt.
Let's go to Adrian next. I'm sorry, Beth, are all of them on the Zoom, are they all committee members or some members of the public as well?
It's a mix. So yeah,
Okay.
Committee members, can you identify yourselves when you introduce yourselves? And Adrian, I think you're up.
Okay. We go to Diane.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a committee member. I'm Diane Rowland. I'm the Dean of the College of Earth, Life, and Health Sciences and the Director of the Maine Agricultural and Forest Experiment Station at the University of Maine.
Before I introduce the other co-chair, are there any other committee members I've missed?
Nancy Beardsley and Adrian Lee.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Oh, great. I just got a new laptop like 5 minutes before this meeting and I didn't have audio a minute ago. So I'm Nancy Beardsley. I'm the Deputy Director for the Maine CDC. Nice to see you all.
And then Adrian.
Hi, I'm Adrian Lee. I served on the committee for the past few years and New Beet Farm in Knox, Maine.
Great. And then turn it over to my co-chair for a second. Senator Brenner.
Thank you, Representative Ankleys. My name is Stacey Brenner. I represent Senate District 30, which includes all of Gorman, most of Scarborough, and I'm a committee member. And outside my legislative role, I'm the president and CEO of Maine Farmland Trust and own a farm operation with my husband in Scarborough. It's great to see everyone.
So, and I'm Dan Ankleys. I represent part of Brunswick, one of the places where we have had a PFAS incident, though not an agricultural one in nature. Senator Brenner and I both serve on the Environment and Natural Resources Committee in the legislature. So that's it for introduction. So, sorry. Sorry, I'm getting used to chairing things.
Keitha from Misty Wood Farm.
Welcome. So the next thing to do was to turn things over to the director of the PFAS Fund, Beth Valentine, who's going to now provide us all with a series of updates as to the latest goings on with our fund.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Yeah, we've had a really busy 6 months since the committee met last March. So I'm going to take, I don't know, 30 to 45 minutes to review what we have been working on, what we've accomplished. There are a few spots along the way I want to stop and have discussion with the committee members. And just a reminder to members of the public who are watching, when the committee is discussing, it really is a discussion just for the committee members. And there'll be opportunities for public comment, which is actually our third agenda item, planning for a meeting specifically for the purpose of soliciting public input. But the conversations today will be among committee members. So with that, so let me share my screen. Okay, can folks see the agenda? Okay. I will begin with statutory changes. Maybe. Okay. So when we met a year ago in September of 2024, we discussed some desired statutory changes that we wanted to improve the efficiency, clarity of the PFAS fund. Those changes were included in the bill LD 130 that was signed into law and became effective 2 weeks ago on September 24th, 2025. And I'll run through just what those changes are. This 7 MRSA 320K sub 4 is a new section that clarifies that any information that the department collects related to our health initiative, so blood testing, mental health support services, is confidential medical information. To be clear, the department is not getting any clinical information, but we are developing lists of eligible people, and we will have billing information. And that is all confidential, which we could have argued it was anyway, but by having it in statute, it's just abundantly clear that this information cannot be shared except for billing purposes. The next change, 320K sub 5, was reworked and sub 5 lists lots of purposes of the fund, but a new purpose is personnel services. And then through the governor's budget bill, a position was approved for a management analyst position, meaning that hopefully later this fall, we'll be advertising for a new position. The management analyst will help to corral all the contracts. To date, PFAS fund staff, myself, Sarah, and Melissa, and I'm remiss, Sarah is new to the team since we met last March. She is the director, or she's responsible for administration of our research grants. So right now, Sarah, Melissa, and I are all doing our own contracts. Once we have a management analyst, we'll have like one point to keep track of finances in and out. Sub 5B, author. So in our statute, the original version states that the fund can buy and sell real estate, but not what becomes of those funds. So with this change, it's the any proceeds from sales or leases will go back into the PFAS fund, which was always the intention, but it wasn't clearly laid out in statute. So this change just makes that clear. Here's a point where I want to stop and discuss. We, a year ago, had a conversation about wanting continuity and leadership of the advisory committee that wasn't disrupted by election cycles. Initially, the chairs were appointed by the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House. And now with this change to the statute, any member of the advisory committee can serve as chair for a term of 2 years, and chairs may serve consecutive terms. So I guess I want to ask the committee, when and how do we want to select new chairs?
There's no cap on the consecutive terms, though, the way that it's written.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Weigh in from computers. Go ahead, Nancy.
Hi, Beth. I was just going to suggest that it might be helpful if committee members are considering taking this on is to understand the time commitment and, you know, what it looks like to be a co-chair. Might be helpful.
Would you like me to take that, or Senator Brenner, having served in this role, would you like to take it?
Director Valentine, I would say that the lion's share of the work in preparation for these meetings is certainly managed by you, with some consultation and some back and forth. There have been times we've had some pre-meetings, but for the most part, I think we've been able to, for the most part, rely on the folks at the department who work within the fund to produce the agenda for the meetings and the materials. So from my experience, it's not terribly time consuming. So I think it's but the conflict arises with the elected nature of the chairs and the fact that we need to have meetings during the legislative session. It just makes it challenging for a legislator to be in the role of chair.
In terms of time commitment, the committee, initially, we met quite frequently when we were developing the plan and even the initial rules. But now that the program is sort of up and running, 2 to 3 meetings a year, I think, is a reasonable expectation.
Director Valentine, is there an expectation that this committee would make a decision today about a new process, or is it more of a discussion item?
It's more of a discussion item. I think rather than putting anybody on the spot, I could suggest that if people are interested in serving as chair, you can email me, call me after the meeting. And then I can share that out with the full committee. And the other question is the question of timing. Do we want to select new chairs ahead of the legislative session, given the conflict that Senator Brenner just noted, that oftentimes it's just difficult for legislators to make time during the session? Or Representative Ankley is brand new to this role, so it feels a little awkward to
Don't take it personally.
You know, do we want to wait a year? I don't think, you know, I think we can decide when we want to elect new chairs and how we want to do that.
So I think maybe it seems like there could be some offline outreach after the meeting. That's kind of the sense I'm getting, that I get a sense of the room, like that's where we want to go with this for now. I'm seeing,
I think so.
I'm gonna say no reaction is sort of assent at this point. So I think let's go with that. I think it's something for us to chew on. And if people, again, we heard from the director, if people are interested, we could send a communication to her, outside of the meeting, and she can, based on the feedback she gets, we can have a better sense of where we could go with this. So I think let's move on to the next item at this
Okay.
point, so we can keep things going.
Looks like Adrian has her hand up.
Oh, sorry about that. I missed your hand, Adrian. Go ahead.
I don't want to derail the question more about timing, but just also curious. We currently have like co-chairs, right, for each subcommittee, and just wondering now that we are like kind of out of the, what I would say, like there's a lot, like you were saying, Beth, there's a lot of work early on, and just thinking about whether it's recruiting or how we want to look at this going forward. Do we still, yeah, just kind of curious if the framework for having all these subcommittee co-chairs still makes sense in the framework that we really, I feel like, benefited from early on in this development, and just kind of curious how that plays into not only the timing of when we elect new ones, but how we recruit chairs and like what the ask is of those the chairs of the committees.
Yeah, so the subcommittees were really creatures of the planning phase. So we had subcommittees for each of the 4 program elements: research, direct assistance, land, and health. And for research and land, those subcommittees have been superseded by advisory panels. And I'll be speaking about them in a little bit. And those advisory panels, the composition is set in rule. So we don't actually have co-chairs of those panels, but I think to your point, we are asking people to commit a lot of time. There are members of the committee who are on the research panel and on the advisory committee. And we do tap the same people frequently. So I would love suggestions for how to identify additional members to serve either on this committee or on the land or research advisory panel.
For people to communicate to you after the meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up. It's a very good point.
I just have a
Commissioner Logan.
procedural question related to the chairs. Would there be an assumption that the people who are currently chairs should either indicate if they do not want to serve and be replaced, or that if no replacements are chosen, the expectation will be that they will continue to serve?
I think that's a fair point. Yeah.
I would put out there that if there is no interest that comes to you, I'm happy to, even though I'm a rookie, I'm happy to continue in the role just to help make sure there is continuity if nobody wants to step up. Just it's something I don't mind doing and that I can make time for if that is needed. But I definitely would defer to people with far more experience than me in the agricultural. I do hope somebody might consider bringing their institutional knowledge to that role, if possible. We had a new person enter the room, so I want to just continue with go back to introductions really quick, if you don't mind.
Rachel Lowe, I'm a PFAS navigator.
Thank you.
And Melissa Hamlin. Yes, I work on the PFAS fund team, responsible for land acquisitions and stewardship.
concerned about.
Continuing with the statutory changes. Moving over there. See the cursor. There it is. Oh. So our third agenda item is discussion of a public meeting to take input from the public. I did want to point out that having one public meeting is a change. Previously, we were required to have 2 public hearings annually. And this is sort of a semantics issue. Hearings has a particular meaning in the context of agency action, like rulemaking, which is different from a public meeting under the Freedom of Information Act. So just cleaning up the language and having one public meeting annually. The discussion at this time last year was that now that the program is up and running, people can reach out to the department at any time. They can likewise reach out to members of the advisory panel as needed, and we'll have at least one public meeting annually for the purpose of soliciting input for this committee to solicit public input, which will be separate from the department seeking public input, for example, related to rulemaking, which is what I will be talking about next. The rules to implement the PFAS fund went into effect in March of 2024. And now with just a bit over a year of experience implementing those rules, they needed to be tweaked a little bit to improve clarity, facilitate implementation, and also to align the fund's appeal procedures with the department's appeal procedures that went into effect later in 2024 after our rules had gone into effect. So I notice a public rulemaking was posted today on our website and went out to the PFAS Fund listserv. It will be published in the Kennebec Journal tomorrow. There will be a public hearing back in this room and on Zoom on October 28th. And then the deadline to submit written comments is November 7th. And all the details about that is included in the respective public notices. So let me give you a quick update on what the fund has been doing over the past 6 months. Well, really since March of 2024, we have provided 2.3 million in direct financial and technical assistance to PFAS impacted farmers. These funds have been in the form of income replacement payments, administrative cost grants, and professional services. So things like business planning, marketing. If, for example, a farm needed to pivot their organization, their business because of PFAS, and they're trying to develop new markets, the fund has been able to support marketing to help develop those new markets. We have been working with the navigators from UMaine Cooperative Extension, 2 of whom are present here in the room today. Their job is to be the node that connects impacted producers to resources to help them address the challenges of PFAS. So whether these resources are from our department, other state agencies, private entities, they are available to assist with things like filling out applications or making a phone call to connect potentially with a pro bono attorney, as an example. So that program is up and running, and the cost of that program is not included in the 2.3 million directly to impacted producers. I mentioned the advisory panels. The land advisory panel composition is established in the PFAS Fund Rule Chapter 405. There are representatives from DICF, DEP, Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, and 4 public members. Those public members represent the agricultural sector, real estate transactions, and land use planning. The panel advises us on acquisitions, future uses of properties, policy for researcher access, leasing considerations, communications, etc. And the panel meets roughly every other month. As you know, we closed on our first property in February of 2025. It is a 107-acre property in Waldo County. Of that, about a quarter is a field that historically had been used to grow hay for dairy animals. The soil is moderately contaminated, 12.6 parts per billion PFAS, 3.9 parts per billion PFOA. With these levels of PFAS in the soil, it's not suitable for growing hay for dairy animals. So PFAS Fund team visited the site this spring with an avian specialist. We had a couple site visits, the purpose of which was to better understand the property. So with the avian specialist, she confirmed that there were no threatened migratory birds in the area, which is unfortunate for the birds, but it does make management of the property easier. We had another site visit with a dairy and forage specialist who works with the PFAS response team. He identified that the field is overgrown with reed canary grass, which is an invasive species, not a lot of, it's not a good forage for animals. And his recommendation was a 3 to 5 year rotation in corn. This would help to manage the reed canary grass. And the corn produced, whether as silage or snaplage, is likely safe for dairy animals. So this is the option we are pursuing. We're looking to lease the property out to a farmer to grow corn. The leasee would be obligated to work with DICF's PFAS response program to monitor to make sure that, in fact, the milk that would ultimately, we would be leasing the property out for corn production. That corn could potentially be fed to dairy cows. And we know that corn takes up less PFAS than grasses. So the transfer factor is much lower. And then even within the corn plant, the ear, the grain, has less PFAS than the stalk. So knowing that the transfer factor to corn is much lower than it is to grass, we're fairly confident that this corn would be safe to feed to dairy animals. But as a condition of the lease, there will be an obligation to work with the PFAS response program to test both inputs and outputs at the leasees, the person who leases from us at that farm, to ensure that products are safe for sale. The remainder of the property is forested, and we are exploring the potential for a demonstration forest in partnership with the Maine Forest Service. So the Maine Forest Service anticipates that they will complete a management plan for the property this winter. They'll be doing it as a joint training exercise for their district foresters. Then separate from that effort, we are working with DEP's VRAP program, Voluntary Response Action Program, to identify environmental covenants for the property. So these are restrictions on the use of the property. For example, no groundwater extraction, the property can't be used for residences, schools, childcare facilities, or long-term healthcare facilities. And by enrolling the property in the VRAP program, these environmental covenants will be recorded with the Registry of Deeds so that any future owner is aware of the PFAS contamination, aware of the limitations, and also they will be protected from liability related to PFAS. We are also investigating making a payment in lieu of taxes to the municipality. The state does not typically pay property taxes, but we do not want municipalities to bear that burden, that loss of tax value resulting from the state purchase of these PFAS impacted properties. So as a policy determination, we will be paying a payment equivalent to what a private property owner would pay if the land was enrolled as open space. So that essentially provides at least a 20% discount on the valuation. And Melissa is working with the this particular municipality to go through the mechanisms of getting that payment out. And then we anticipate closing on a second property within the next month or so, and a third property and appraisal is underway. So I think I'll pause here and ask if there's any questions or comments related to the land acquisition program. I will carry on. So the purpose of the research program is to support, facilitate, and share research that helps farmers determine their best options for maintaining and enhancing viability despite the presence of PFAS on their property. And there are several different elements to this program, the most significant being the research grants. And I'll spend most of my time this morning reviewing the research grants, but we also work to facilitate connections and communications. We connect researchers. We're looking for sites to conduct their research with impacted producers who have indicated a willingness to support research. We facilitate communications among institutions in Maine and beyond. We will be cataloging research results from research funded by the department, as well as the wider research community. And we are exploring the creation of a research station.
I'm sorry, Beth, I do have a question.
Yeah.
So with the previous section on the corn, and would that, I know that's not research, but would that information be used to improve some of this? You were talking about testing the inputs and the outputs. Is that connected to this in any way?
It is, although not directly through a research grant.
Sure.
So the PFAS response program within the Bureau of Agriculture, Food and Rural Resources within the department, they routinely work with PFAS impacted farms and do a lot of sampling. Oftentimes, so the Department of Environmental Protection is doing their LD 1600 groundwater and soil investigation. If they identify a farm, DEP notifies DACF that there's a farm, there's a history of sludge spreading, and starting in 2024, the PFAS response program assumed responsibility for sampling soil. And after the initial sampling of soil and water is conducted, then PFAS response sort of take a step back and consider other factors like what is being produced here, how is it being produced. There are screening levels for PFAS in soil, but a screening level just means we need to take a closer look. So the PFAS response team is collecting this data, and that, for instance, their knowledge helps them to one, make recommendations to the impacted producers, but has also helped to inform us in setting priorities for
Okay.
research.
Yep.
So it's kind of a long-winded, winding.
No, but
answer.
that's helpful because it seemed like there would be a connection there. So
Yeah.
that's great. Thank you very much.
Yep. So like the Land Advisory Panel, we have a Research Advisory Panel represented by DICF, DEP, DHHS, University of Maine, and 3 public members. Those public members represent agriculturally related PFAS science and the agricultural sector. They advise on research priorities, access to DACF-owned land for research, and they meet roughly quarterly. So just let me talk about why. Here we go. Talk about the process for soliciting research grants, because we have our research advisory panel that helps to set the priorities, but then the actual selection does not include those committee members. We work with peer reviewers. These are subject area experts. So quickly go through the process. The department issues an RFA in which we've identified priorities. Applicants submit their pre-proposals and staff screen those for competitiveness. We're not doing a deep dive into the technical merits at this point. It's to let the applicants know that, based on a preliminary review, this idea fits within our priorities or it doesn't. So that, if it doesn't, the applicant can rework their proposal to make it fit potentially, or they can decide it's not worth their time to develop a full proposal. And it also helps us within the department to start identifying who we're going to need for peer reviewers. What are the subject areas? So following the mandatory pre-proposal, applicants submit their full proposals. Again, staff screen for completeness and consistency with the RFA. And then we have a team of peer reviewers who evaluate on the merit using a rubric. Based on the feedback from staff and peer reviewers, the commissioner makes the final decision and the department announces the awards. I feel like the signal is going through.
Quick question on
Yeah.
that. Is the intent to do that on an annual basis? Or is it as needed?
So initially, our first RFA was released about this time last year. And again, we've opened the second round just a week ago. In our rules, we are committed to at least one RFA through state fiscal year 27. And beyond that, it's sort of as funds remain available. So these are the 7 awards that we granted this spring, April 2025. So these, all of these projects, as I understand it, have been initiated. The work is underway. And we have begun, or we just issued our next RFA last Wednesday, October 1. So we have major grants. These are grants valued between $100,000 and $500,000. The priority areas are water, soil, and plant studies, animal and animal product studies, and understanding and managing PFAS on farms. And we also have targeted grants. These are new this year. The targeted grants are valued up to $100,000, and we ask applicants to address specific research questions. For example, management of waste products like manure on a farm, safe sources of food for hogs, effective communication strategies, and the extent of PFAS accumulation in pollinators. Applicants can also choose to address one of the 3 priority areas related to the major grants. So some key dates coming up. Next Friday is an information session online that will be for potential applicants, as well as farmers that are interested in working with the researcher on either a targeted or a major grant. So we'll be sending out some more information about that, but the link for the information session is on the department's website. Pre-proposals are due November 10th. These are mandatory. If somebody does not submit a pre-proposal, we will not review their full proposal. Full proposals are due February 13th, and we anticipate announcing the awards in spring of 2026. And here is another point where I want to stop and get some input. Via email, I emailed committee members and asked about expanding the scope of strategy 3E. This would allow, so strategy 3E is strategy related to the major research grants and the targeted grants. And right now we provide 100% of funding for successful grants applications. I've proposed that we use the fund to match research grants supported by third parties. So National Science Foundation, for example, they require matching funds from applicants. And so if another grantor is releasing an RFA that aligns with our priorities and uses a rigorous peer review process, I think it makes good sense to enhance and amplifies the fund's reach where we could provide match to advance research that furthers our goals, but we would not have to provide 100% of the money for these proposals. So I did email the advisory committee about this. Of those who responded, the response was favorable, but I wanted to take an opportunity in an open meeting to get feedback. Is this a good use of the PFAS fund?
Dr. Beardsley has her hand up.
Hi, yeah, I'm sorry, Director Valentine, I may have missed your email on that, but it does sound like a good use of the funding. And I would support that.
Thank you.
We have Diane Rowland has her hand up.
I think you called on me. I didn't quite hear that.
Yes, sorry, I didn't speak up.
It's okay. It said if we have any concerns to respond, so I didn't respond because I don't have any concerns. I think this is a great approach and I definitely support it.
Just want to second that last comment.
I agree. I agree as well.
Any further discussion on this point?
Sorry.
I guess I have one question.
Yes.
Would it be just for, you just be matching funds for like specifically Maine research, or how would that work?
Not necessarily, but it would have to be research that supports our priorities. So Sarah and I were talking about this yesterday, and if it's related to PFAS in agriculture and citrus groves, we wouldn't support that because there's no citrus production in Maine.
Right.
So it would, by requiring that it aligns with our priorities, that is going to meet the needs of Maine farmers, it would potentially be research in another northern state. But as long as the results could be applicable to Maine, I think that's something that we could consider.
That kind of aligned with my question. So would there be criteria? Like you said, like a rigorous peer reviewed process by the other grantor? Like, would there be criteria that people could look at and say, okay, I match that, I don't. I'm studying citrus, I'm not gonna bother applying, that type of thing.
Yeah, so I'll invite people to look at the draft rules that were posted today. I took the liberty of, based on the email responses, to include draft language that would allow for the use of using the fund as match for grant proposals that align with our priorities. And that's where the detail can be found, and I welcome input on those draft rules.
Thank you.
And then I assume there would be some sort of application process to apply for the funds as match.
Yeah.
To follow up on that, would that be within the regular RFA process, or would it be ad hoc?
So I don't want to go too much into the draft rules because we will be having a public hearing for that purpose, but broad strokes, the department would have to approve the other funders' RFA first. We would have to evaluate and say that this RFA aligns with our priorities. And then there would have to be some sort of communication out to applicants that the PFAS fund is a potential source of match funding. And the details of how one would apply to the PFAS fund for match would have to be worked out if this comes to pass.
Other questions on this?
I do have a question. I'm very much in favor of this, and I like the idea of using OPM to maximize and catalyze what the intention is here. I'm just curious if there is a model somewhere out there where public funds like this are being used as match, or are you building this from scratch? I'm just looking to just be appreciative. Yes, but also pay for that.
So maybe Diane why don't you go first, Diane, and then I'll.
Yeah, I was actually going to respond. There is one through AFRI, through NIFA AFRI, that does a match program with commodity groups. It wouldn't be the perfect format probably for what you're thinking, but I do think it's a good model to evaluate.
Great, thank you.
And I was going to say that someone seeking grant funding, often they will commit someone's salary as match, as an example. Mm-hmm. And, that's something that a state agency could do. And so this would be different. But it's not like wildly out of the norm.
It's innovative and very Maine-like, so thank
yes.
you.
I pause and ask two rookie questions about the fund more generally. When the fund, because it's started off as $60 million originally, when it's sitting, does it accrue interest and replenish itself a little bit?
Interesting question. It is accruing interest, but not to the fund itself. It goes into the state treasury. Other programs within the department, like Land for Maine's Future, that fund is in a trust by itself, and so the interest goes back to Land for Maine's Future.
Thank you for that. And then the second question I had was, and this could be anybody answering this, because I'm wondering if anybody has, any research has come up about, are there crops that are particularly effective at leaching PFAS out of the soil?
There have been studies, not especially promising. Director Loisum, do you
No, by all means, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, there are, hemp is commonly studied. There was a study in northern Maine where I think I'm going to tap Sarah, fairly effective at short chain, accumulating short chain, but not long chain. But even that, the rate was like 2% of the concentration in the soil. So it would be decades and decades. And in the meantime, you've got all of this plant matter that now has PFAS in it, and what do you do with that? So it's an area of active investigation. I have not seen a lot of promising results, but Sarah, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, no, that's essentially, you need a plant that takes up a lot of PFAS and grows very quickly, and it's hard to find such a plant. There's not, yeah.
Thank you.
We all are very interested in that exact question.
So with regard to match funding, I hear support from the committee for expanding the use of the PFAS fund to allow for match funding of grants that support our priorities. Sleepiest keyboard. Okay. Physical health. Just, it's been a very busy couple of weeks. On September 24th, the date that the statutory changes in LD 130 went into effect, including that provision, that information about eligibility and billing is de facto confidential. We mailed out letters to over 600 homes that are presumptively eligible for PFAS blood serum testing paid for by the PFAS fund. We worked very closely with Maine DEP. They, as has already been mentioned, have been sampling groundwater and soil for the past several years. They have databases of information of these results. And so using those results, any residential address where the water tested above 20 parts per trillion for a sum of 6 PFAS, and or their soil tested above 170 parts per billion of PFAS in soil, received one of these letters. Recipients are asked to reply with the names of household members and if they're commercial farm workers. We've received several dozen responses now, and this week hope to start sending out the authorization letters to these eligible individuals. So the reason we're asking people to reply is that DEP, when they're collecting data, they might have the homeowner, but that doesn't tell us who's living at the address. Are there children? Is, a partner? Clearly employees wouldn't be included. So we're asking people to respond, let us know who's associated with that address. We're getting ready to send out authorization forms, which individuals then take to their primary care physician, who will then order the test. Included with this mailing will be a document from Maine CDC, which is information for clinicians. A lot of doctors are still unfamiliar with PFAS and blood serum testing. Gratitude to Maine CDC for their work on this project. Once people receive this package, they can schedule an appointment with their primary care physician. The clinician will order the test. The results will go to the ordering physician. No clinical results come back to the department. We are working with Quest Diagnostic Laboratories. The process we used to set this up was an all willing and qualified diagnostic laboratories. the basic criteria was that they have the capability of doing the analysis and also the capability of doing the billing. And so right now that the only lab that met our qualifications is Quest. They have been very good to work with, and they've established a dedicated phone line for logistical questions for the clinicians. So if they have any questions, there's a dedicated line at Quest. There may be a small fee for the blood draw if the individual, if the phlebotomist does not have a contract with Quest. My understanding is that the fee for the draw is about $25. But hopefully, and there are, we'll be sharing a list of Quest walk-in facilities where people can go to have their blood drawn at no cost. But for some folks that don't have ready access to a Quest, a phlebotomist with a Quest contract, there may be a small fee.
I have a lot of questions about this.
Okay, sure.
So the mailing goes out and then what happens in terms of outreach? So like, let's say 500 homes you've not heard from. Is there another letter? Do they get a visit from a navigator, an outreach worker? Like what other follow-up is there to those households?
Yeah. So we haven't planned that yet.
Okay.
You know, the mailing just went out. We're getting a pretty steady response rate.
Yep.
So it's too soon to sort of say like
Okay.
how effective the first round was. And based on that, we'll determine what next steps are. We do have information on our website, so people can go there for kind of an overview. After this first mailing, DEP is continuing to investigate, and as they identify properties above 20 PPT in water, 170 ppb in soil, they will start including a paragraph about the blood testing in those notification letters. So when people are getting their initial results from DEP, they're also being informed at the same time about the blood testing.
That's great. 2 more questions and then I'll let other people do. So then with the physicians outreach, and maybe this is a question more for Nancy, but what education, how is that education being delivered to clinicians, either about the program, well, I guess both about the program and about resources. So if they get the results back and their patient has high levels, I just don't remember what outreach is being done to give them information.
So let me try to advance to my
sorry,
next
is it on the
slide.
next one?
Well, a little bit. So I noted that test results do not come to the Department of Agriculture. But as of June 4th, 2025, PFAS blood serum results must be reported by laboratories to Maine CDC. So that allows the toxicologist at CDC to then follow up with folks.
Oh, so that's who follows up with them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And sort of separate from that, I'm aware of a fellow working with Maine Medical Center who has, his fellowship project has been developing communication related to PFAS for clinicians. So he's working with primary care physicians within Maine Med with a focus on Brunswick and 1 or 2 other communities.
Awesome.
Adrian had a question in the chat. Her audio isn't working, so can I read her question?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Are there strategies in place to reach out to farm workers beyond letter to farm owners? There may be farms where farm workers might not know they are eligible for this unless the farm owner communicates about it to them. Could there be a partnership with the Maine Mobile Health Clinic that could have outreach material?
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. I think for on our website, we include a statement like, if you think you're eligible but you didn't receive a letter, call me. And so that's one avenue. It's not targeted, but it's there. If somebody thinks they're eligible but they haven't received information, reach out to the department. I had a conversation with somebody at Maine Mobile Health just recently, about potentially having Maine Mobile Health come to the agricultural trade show and do blood draws related to support PFAS blood testing. But again, that doesn't get to your key point, Adrian, of like, how are people even going to know? So yeah, open to ideas.
I saw that Senator Brenner had a question. Go ahead, Senator Brenner.
Thank you. Sorry, I get mixed up with where the mute is on Teams versus Zoom. I wanted to just bring up that we have a bill in the legislature, which is LD 582, which would mandate that private insurance cover the cost of the PFAS blood serum testing. The bill is on the appropriations table because it has a general fund allocation that is needed to address employee health plan costs and the what's called a defrail, which I'm not going to get into, which is related to the Affordable Care Act at the federal level. So one pathway for some adjustments here might be if we can pass this bill, we would be able to have some cost savings potentially by mandating that these private insurers help to cover those costs. The one potential way to do that would be to cover the fiscal note with an allocation from the PFAS fund so that we could achieve that fiscal, covering that fiscal note. So that's just something I wanted to bring to the group for discussion. If we did want to support that, it might be worthwhile to have the committee send a letter to the AFA committee at the legislature in order to move that forward.
Do you know what the fiscal note is, the dollar value?
Yep, it's about roughly $200,000.
And that's your bill, correct, Senator?
It is, yep. So we had a funding mechanism in the 131st, but that it was sort of caught up in the kerfuffle at the end of session. So
Is that a one-time cost or annual?
nope, that would be an annual cost.
That. I'm wondering if we could do even better by having unallocated language in a bill like that, that reroutes the interest.
That's what I was thinking.
Back into this fund, instead of the general fund, since that would be a way of keeping this fund more sustainable. And I'm wondering if that could be part of a broader amendment here that would come out of that committee. If we were to do that, and that way, maybe it could result in some kind of savings for us. I don't know how great it would be for the general fund, but certainly interesting to me as a member of this committee.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, we can certainly amend it.
Support that idea, but I don't know if that's a thing that we do or not.
Is this something, I mean, does the committee want to discuss this bill more generally now, or is that appropriate, Director Valentine, at this point, or it wasn't on our?
It wasn't on the agenda, and also people haven't had an opportunity to read it, so maybe, what is your timeline for support from
the end of the 132nd, which will be will ideally adjourn in the latter part of April.
Yeah, we have statutory before April break. I had heard the Senate president absolutely insist to me that they were going to adjourn on time this year. And I hope that's real, but it does give this committee time to think about the legislative vehicle of LD 582 and come to a consensus about how we would want to communicate with the Appropriations Committee. They don't run the table until April, probably. So this committee does have time to come up with a strategy and a plan. So it doesn't have to be taken up at this meeting, but it can be put on the agenda for a future meeting, and we can also be given prompts over email in the interim from our director. So that would be something we could all do in the meantime. Does that sound agreeable? Commissioner Beal.
Yes, I was just going to say that I think that makes a lot of sense. And in the meantime, we can look at, any comparable types of language, statutory language, and if there are any other examples that maybe mirror what we're talking about here.
Well taken. Commissioner Loiseau.
Thank you. Beth, for the 600 or so, I know you're waiting to see how many you get back with an affirmative response, but do you have a rough estimate of how much you would anticipate expending out of the fund for this first round that you've solicited?
I do. We budgeted over 2 years, over $400,000.
And then can you remind me if we were anticipating that is something that would be able to go on for some period of time? Or is it like many things connected to the fund that it will continue to occur as funding is available?
The latter. Yeah, our projected budget initially was 5 years. I think we can probably extend that a little bit if we were able to keep the interest that would allow us to make long-term plans for things like management of the properties that we acquire.
We love long-term.
I'm sorry, I forget to do this. I
No, that's
just start
okay.
asking my
Okay.
questions.
I'm still getting, I've not shared anything at state level before either, so.
This is going back to the main mobile health outreach, but another workforce that could help with this are community health workers, which they employ. But I think that could be helpful with the testing follow-up and the education and making sure people understand this is available to them and what the resources are. Are the materials translated? Do you know?
Not yet that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And this document CDC produced is really for clinicians.
Sure.
It's not, I think it's very digestible, but it's not intended to be for a lay audience.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Back to you, Director Valentine.
Okay. So I was talking about the work that CDC is doing with support from the PFAS fund. I mentioned that as of June, blood serum test results are a reportable condition. As of last week, they had received almost 50 results, and of those, about 10% warranted follow-up because of the elevated level of PFAS in serum. The second bullet, cholestyramine case studies, when this committee met in March, the committee supported a proposal to shift money from a clinical trial, which strategy 4E in the implementation plan, to this cholestyramine case series. So as a reminder, cholestyramine is a medication that is typically used to treat high cholesterol, but it also helps body to eliminate PFAS. And it has, so the thought back in March was rather than create a clinical trial out of whole cloth to support some further study of this medication, to document the clinical application of cholestyramine through the publication of a case series, and also to convene a panel of physicians, scientists, and affected community members to further vet, optimize, and publish a protocol for administration of cholestyramine for PFAS body burden reduction. So CDC is in the process of negotiating a contract with Maine Medical Center to launch this case series. And as I understand it, they are nearing execution of that contract. And another item that CDC is working on is a farm soil exposure study. They're still in the preliminary phases, but they have been sampling 3 different air sampling devices and methods. They are responding to comments and hope to publish a manuscript on a modeling exercise that they've conducted of farm worker soil exposure, looking at different pathways, inhalation, ingestion, and dermal exposure. And they are close to signing a contract with Johns Hopkins University to actually conduct the soil exposure study. So progress is being made on that front as well. And my final slide, mental health. You all know the fund has been exploring options to develop a mental health support program to provide counseling by culturally literate providers, training in mental health first aid for agricultural service providers, peer supports, and other resources. So I've been making progress here. The PFAS Fund commissioned a report from Farm First, which is an organization out of Vermont. As part of that report, they identified a cohort of about 120 licensed clinicians. So these are social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, all licensed in Maine. And of them, 82 indicated a definite interest in being part of a trained group to provide support to PFAS impacted individuals. Another 32 indicated a possible interest. 87 indicated that they would be willing to accommodate and schedule an occasional PFAS-related referral in their practice within a week or 2 of the time of the referral. 90% indicated a willingness to attend a 2-hour virtual training to better understand the unique stressors faced by farmers and other impacts by PFAS, and to learn about the fundamentals of PFAS contamination. 80% indicated that they would be willing to provide 15-minute check-in calls in addition to the traditional 15-minute hour of counseling. So this is really exciting. You know, we have names and addresses of folks that are willing to work with agricultural producers as well as non-farm residents whose exposure to PFAS can be linked back to the land application of biosolids. I have been in conversation with Cooperative Extension about training in basic mental health first aid for ag service providers. For example, people from our PFAS response team who work directly with impacted farmers and, you know, identify that the person they're working with is under stress. And so this training would help to know how to react and respond to distressed individuals and how to best connect farmers to mental health support services and programs. And then just a few weeks ago, UMaine Cooperative Extension hosted a Land and Sea Farmer Wellness Forum. This was supported in part by the PFAS Fund and the Department of Marine Resources. The event brought together over 200 service providers who are working with Maine's farming and fishing communities to address knowledge gap about physical and psychological health, share resources, find opportunities within existing resources to create networks of care, and consider new policies and programs. As a result of this meeting, I've been in conversation with Maine Mobile Health, for example, Maine CDC's Office of Injury and Violence Prevention, and we're exploring ways to work together. So there's a lot of momentum underway for the work of the PFAS Fund to support PFAS impacted farmers, but also more broadly for the fishing and farming community. So nothing specific to report now other than to say I feel like there's some good momentum and we're making progress.
So I just want to make sure that I'm not making an assumption, but when we you talked on this slide specifically, you spoke of non-farm residents and farmers and agricultural producers, that employees and ag workers are included in that.
Yes.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that this mailing to the 600+ residences, people who respond to us and identify people associated with that address, all of those people are eligible for both the blood testing and the mental health support services when they become available.
Will those trainings be free?
I will endeavor for them to be free.
I just see a lot of interest in those.
Yeah.
Even beyond this, that was a great response rate, but just even beyond that list, I could see there being a lot of interest. So I was just curious.
Yeah, I think that's something that PFAS fund can cover.
Adrienne has her hand up.
Yep, we have two questions. Senator Brenner was first and then Adrian next. Go ahead, Senator Brenner.
Thank you, Representative. Director Valentine, you maybe mentioned this and I missed it, but could you, if you have any data, can you share with us the impact in terms of how many farm workers, farm owners, impacted folks have access to mental health services that we are providing?
So the PFAS fund isn't providing mental health support services yet. Through MFT and MOFGA, the PFAS Wellness Fund, I know I have stats on how many people have used that, at least in like the initial 2 years of the program. But I can follow up and share the limited information I have.
Thanks so much.
And we have Adrian Lee next.
And I'd offer to read, she doesn't have audio, so I was going to read, but
Yes.
it's not there yet. Here we go. Two questions from Adrian. Will the soil exposure study that we are supporting with this fund be based in Maine? And then the second question related to the mental health support, is there a way for farmers to access mental health services outside of an ag-based program? I would argue that a lot of the mental health needs for impacted farmers and farm workers could be supported by a wide variety of mental health supports, not just through trained ag providers.
Well, the first one is easy. Yes, the soil exposure study will be conducted in Maine. And I think I didn't quite understand. So we're looking to develop a program that provides support through a variety of resources. So licensed clinicians being one, peer support being another. The training for the ag service providers is really to help them to recognize and respond to stress, but they wouldn't be providing the support necessarily themselves.
The trainings that you mentioned, are they basically meant to get people in the mental health field more familiar with this specific problem so that whoever may reach out to them, they would have this background that they didn't have before? Is that kind of what you're going for?
That's part of it. So one element of the training for clinicians would be PFAS and what does it mean? And, it's kind of this, invisible, tasteless, silent threat that catches most people by surprise and therefore is anxiety inducing. So there's kind of like the science and the impact of PFAS, but also there's the cultural literacy for agricultural producers. And so we want clinicians to understand like typical stressors of the occupations related to farming, dependent on weather and financial stress and sort of unique stressors to this particular population separate from the PFAS.
other,
Any more from Adrian?
Nothing yet.
um, why don't you continue? And
Okay.
if something else pops up, we'll circle back to it.
So I'm going to stop sharing and so the final item to discuss with the committee is what do we want to do for our public meeting to solicit input from the public on the work of the fund. Traditionally, we have held a meeting at the Agricultural Trade Show in January. This year, that's January 13 to 15. I don't know. I've asked for a room. I don't know yet which day it will be. I guess I think it's important for the department to be there, and we will be there regardless to share information about the PFAS fund and the PFAS response program. But do we want to, as we have in the past, sort of incorporate updates from the department with an opportunity for the public to speak to the advisory committee?
Are you asking whether we want it to be a public comment session?
Well, yes. We're obligated to have at least one public comment session annually. So I guess, do we want to have it at the trade show? And if not, do we want to have it somewhere else?
And I'll follow up. Is that okay?
Please.
Sorry, I didn't look to you.
No, it's all good.
What was the public presence there at the last? I can't remember. Were there more department and committee members than public there? Or how did those numbers suss out?
Yeah, the audiences the past few years have been modest. The first year, which would have been 23, the room was packed. 24 and 25, less so. And the people who were there, it felt like they were taking in a lot of information, but not giving much feedback.
I recall that, and I just didn't want to assume that it was just me. Does another follow-up, sorry.
Okay.
Do you and others think that there's a way to capture more people? It's a very busy time. You would think that because so many folks are there that they may filter into the room, but I myself, that is the only reason I attend the show at this point. So, but there are other people that they don't make it to the meeting room. Do you think that there's another venue, another time and space, and that would attract more public comment? Because that is essentially, well, we have to fulfill that requirement. We want it to be productive and constructive. So
I had a similar question to that one.
Yeah, I think there's room for improvement, definitely. I don't have the answer. So
This, before I go to Commissioner Beal, this wouldn't preclude us from a future outreach somewhere else. If we were to hold something at the trade show, that wouldn't cut us off from doing it elsewhere at another time. Okay. Commissioner Beal, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to note that at previous public meetings at the trade show, I recall that there are some farmers that would show up but wouldn't speak necessarily, or would wait to talk to staff and advisory committee members after. I think, when we do like a public hearing or a public meeting like that, there's a certain structure that can be a little bit intimidating, maybe. And I think there might be an opportunity to have an input session at the trade show that's not so formal, and we might get better participation from the agriculture community anyway. And then to have, to fulfill that requirement that we do some kind of a public meeting for broader input, I think something that could be more geographically accessible, something online, a Teams meeting or hybrid or something like that at another time could be beneficial.
Thank you for that. think that makes a lot of sense.
I think so too. Thank you.
Other questions on this point of public access? I'm not seeing any. That was our last official agenda item. Is there, while we're all here, is there anything else that people wanted to bring up while we're all in the room and on online together?
I just wanted clarification. So is the consensus that the advisory committee not hold an information session during the trade show? Or that it be something different from what we have done traditionally?
Sense was that the commissioner suggested an informal offering for people to provide one-on-one input to the department or the funds staffing it. Did I, Commissioner, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah. I mean, I think an informational session where people can come and learn about the PFAS fund and what it's doing. And also if they are an impacted farmer or just have questions about the fund, they could come to this session. It just wouldn't be quite so formal with the kind of structure that we've had in the past.
And then I also see that Adrian had her hand up again. Is there something written that has come through that?
Let's see. Yes, here it is. Okay, I agree with Commissioner Beal's suggestion. It sounds great. Also, thank you for the feedback, Beth, about the mental health services. Maybe there's a little discussion of mental health. Should we finish with the discussion of the public meeting and then circle back to mental health? Or should I read that now?
Does anyone else have any further discussion on the meeting aspect of it? Okay, yeah, let's stick with those and then we can come back to mental health after.
I was just gonna sort of suggest if there was an opportunity to do like an information sharing with questions afterwards type of thing, if that would. Yeah, and in some location that would be more likely to draw in more farmers and people who live near farms. For that sort of public
I think
input type thing.
that seems consistent with what the commissioner suggested, where after the ag trade show that there would be something either in a more agricultural part of the state or online at an accessible time, where it could be exactly as you said, where people.
It just might draw more people if it's like, okay, this is going to be information, what we've learned this far, like what's available. Not, a way to get more information out there as well.
Good point.
I do like the idea of having the presentations and having the gathering that we have that you put on and the staff is there. It's always something, I always learn plenty. It's a good way to consume the information. I think it's important for us to be at that meeting and to be at that event. But I do think, to the commissioner's point, that that making it the formal public comment period can be a little bit odd for someone who's not used to asking questions. So I hope I clarified what I had said earlier.
So question to the committee. I agree. We should have an information session. This is what the PFAS response program is doing. This is what the PFAS fund is doing. Do we want to bill that as an advisory committee meeting as well, or just have strictly DACF updates and then in addition, have this separate, smaller, more intimate event?
I'd suggest maybe that, yes, bill it as a meeting, not like necessarily the public comment meeting, but like, as long as it's also, as long as like all of it's sort of advertised together, it's like, also you can do this. Like, you'll also have the chance to, ask your questions outside the context of this information, if you don't want to ask it. Like, that's sort of where you kind of advertise that accommodation, right? Does that make sense to folks in the room or?
So allowing the opportunity for a Q&A and sharing without it being on the public record type thing. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. I mean, people could talk during the meeting, but also after. And then we would fulfill our actual requirements in a future meeting somewhere else where it's more of that formal thing. But just kind of allowing a broad sort of variety of ways to communicate at the ag trade show. It seems like that's kind of what I'm hearing from different people so far. Commissioner Beal.
Sorry, I was just getting a little bit confused about which meeting we were talking about. Maybe I'll just say one more time from my perspective. I think it would be good to have an informational session aimed at farmers and, maybe service providers in the ag community at the trade show. And then to fulfill our requirement to meet as an advisory board and have some kind of a public meeting at either before or after the trade show, I'm not sure it really matters, where we would follow the same format that we have in the past with an overview presentation of, what we're doing and then formally invite public feedback, but to maybe hold those two meetings in two different ways, because I do think that they would draw some different participants.
Director Valentine, do you feel like you have good enough sort of direction from the conversation
I
that
do.
you can synthesize something that maybe you let us all know about ahead of time?
Yeah, I'll get some ideas together and share them out with the committee.
I hope that wasn't too muddled for you, but
No,
I feel like it went in a good direction. Let's go back to that mental health question while we have it coming up on noon. It's actually afternoon.
What Adrian wrote was, I was mostly concerned about the timing of and availability of clinicians to impacted farmers. Will there only be specific mental health clinicians that are approved by these funds? Or are we willing to just pay for mental health services that the farmer or farm worker has identified? To get a group of individuals that tend to have a hard time accessing mental health services, how do we ensure the broadest options for mental health services? And also, how do we ensure that we're moving this forward as soon as possible?
Yeah, all good points. And I think it's going to come down to contracting. And so the training, I think the training for clinicians, I think is something we can potentially do in the first half of 2026. But then there are different avenues that I just have to figure out what's going to be practical. We can do like a blanket contract and have all of these clinicians approved under it. We could potentially make a grant to the existing PFAS Wellness Fund, and then MFT or MOFGA would make the initial payment to the clinician, and we would reimburse either MFT or MOFGA. So that's like figuring out how to make this happen is it's a bit of a challenge, but something that now that all the other elements of the PFAS fund are operational, I can finally focus on the mental health support services.
So it is 5 minutes after noon, and I do want to respect the time of all of the committee members who took time out of their day to join us today. Is there any further pressing business that we need to take up before I move to adjourn? So if there's no objection, I'm gonna go ahead and adjourn us and thank everyone today for participating and for all the really good points on all the different things we covered today. And I look forward to, doing some of that interim work that we talked about during the meeting before our next meeting and.
When do we want to meet again? I know.
Yes, oh, yes, yes. Good point.
So mid-November? Before mid-November to early December. Does that seem okay before the session starts and holidays?
I would be happy. Thank you.
All right, I'll propose some dates.
Thank you, everybody.